Welcome back, lovely ladies. If you want to become the woman of your dreams, make sure to hit that subscribe button and like this video. And join our Patreon for even more exclusive content. Now, let's dive into today's story.
The crisp Scottish air nipped at Ashley's cheeks as he stepped off the train, his twin sister Alice close behind. The platform at Inverness Station bustled with activity, a far cry from the quiet country estate they'd left behind in England. Ashley adjusted the strap of his leather satchel, scanning the crowd for a familiar face. "Do you see Aunt Bridget?" Alice asked, her voice tinged with both excitement and apprehension. Ashley shook his head. "Not yet, though I'm not sure I'd recognize her even if she were right in front of us. It's been years." As they collected their luggage, Ashley couldn't help but feel a twinge of anxiety. At 22, he and Alice were hardly children anymore, yet this trip to stay with their aunt felt oddly like being sent away to summer camp. Their parents had insisted it would be good for them to spend time with family in Scotland, away from the pressures and expectations of their privileged life in England. "Ashley! Alice!" A sharp voice cut through the din of the station. They turned to see a tall, angular woman striding towards them. Aunt Bridget's salt and pepper hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her piercing blue eyes seemed to assess them critically as she approached. "Well, don't just stand there gawking," she said briskly. "Let's get you two in the car. We've got a bit of a drive ahead of us." As they loaded their bags into Aunt Bridget's weathered Land Rover, Ashley exchanged a glance with Alice. This was certainly going to be interesting. The drive to Aunt Bridget's estate took them through winding country roads, past rolling hills dotted with sheep and ancient stone walls. Ashley found himself mesmerized by the rugged beauty of the landscape, so different from the manicured gardens of their family home. "Now," Aunt Bridget began as they turned onto a narrow lane, "I expect you both to pull your weight while you're here. This isn't a holiday resort." Ashley bristled slightly at her tone. "Of course, Aunt Bridget, we're happy to help out however we can." She glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "Good. Your cousins Evan and Aaron are already here. They arrived last week and have been getting settled in." Alice perked up at this. "Oh, how lovely. We haven't seen them in ages. How old are they now?" "Evan's 24. Aaron's 20, Aunt Bridget replied. "They're good kids, hard workers. You could learn a thing or two from them." Ashley bit back a retort. He wasn't used to being spoken to this way, and he could feel his hackles rising, but he reminded himself of his parents' words before they left. "Remember your noblesse oblige, Ashley. Be gracious, be kind, and above all, be humble." As they crested a hill, a sprawling stone house came into view. Ivy crawled up its walls, and a plume of smoke rose from one of several chimneys. It looked like something out of a Bronte novel. "Welcome to Thistle Grove," Aunt Bridget announced as she pulled up to the house. "You're home for the next few months." The next few hours were a whirlwind of introductions and settling in. Evan and Aaron greeted them warmly, though Ashley couldn't help but notice a certain wariness in their eyes. He wondered what Aunt Bridget had told them about their English cousins. That evening, as they all gathered in the large kitchen for dinner, Ashley began to get a sense of what life at Thistle Grove would be like. Aunt Bridget ran a tight ship, with everyone expected to contribute to meal preparation and cleanup. The food was simple but hearty, a far cry from the gourmet meals Ashley was accustomed to. As they ate, Aunt Bridget laid out her expectations. "We rise early here," she said between bites of shepherd's pie. "Breakfast is at 6 sharp. After that, we all have our tasks for the day. The estate doesn't run itself, you know." Ashley nodded, trying to hide his dismay. He was used to sleeping in until at least 9, with breakfast served whenever he decided to come downstairs. This was going to be a significant adjustment. "What sort of tasks?" Alice asked, her voice betraying a mix of curiosity and trepidation. Evan grinned. "Oh, all sorts. Mending fences, tending the gardens, helping with the animals. Aunt Bridget's got a bit of everything here." "Animals?" Ashley couldn't keep the surprise out of his voice. "Aye," Aaron chimed in. "Sheep, mostly. A few cows. Oh, and the chickens, of course." Ashley exchanged a glance with Alice. They'd never so much as touched a farm animal in their lives. This was going to be more challenging than they'd anticipated. The next morning came far too early for Ashley's liking. He stumbled down to the kitchen, bleary-eyed and disoriented, to find the others already finishing up their breakfast. "Sleeping Beauty finally graces us with his presence," Aunt Bridget said dryly. "You'll need to do better than this, lad. There's work to be done." Ashamed and irritated in equal measure, Ashley mumbled an apology and quickly ate the porridge Alice had saved for him. As he spooned the bland mixture into his mouth, he couldn't help but long for the perfectly prepared omelets and freshly squeezed orange juice he was used to at home. The day that followed was unlike anything Ashley had ever experienced. Aunt Bridget put him to work immediately, sending him out with Evan to repair a section of fence that had been damaged in a recent storm. The physical labor was grueling, and Ashley found himself sweating and aching in places he didn't know could ache. "You're not used to this kind of work, are you?" Evan asked as they took a brief water break. Ashley shook his head, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. "Not at all. We have groundskeepers for this sort of thing at home." Evan raised an eyebrow. "Must be nice," he said, a hint of something envy, resentment, in his voice. "Here, we do everything ourselves. Aunt Bridget says it builds character." As the days went by, Ashley found himself struggling to adapt to this new lifestyle. The early mornings, the constant physical labor, the lack of modern conveniences he'd always taken for granted, it all wore on him. He caught himself more than once longing for the comforts of home, for the deference and respect he was accustomed to receiving. One evening, about a week into their stay, Ashley overheard a conversation between Evan and Aaron that made him pause. "They're not what I expected," Aaron was saying in a low voice. "I thought they'd be more stuck up," Evan supplied. "Yeah, me too, but they're trying at least. Ashley's hopeless with the sheep, but he doesn't give up." Ashley felt a mix of emotions at this: pride that they saw him trying, shame that he was so obviously out of his element, and a lingering sense of indignation. Didn't they understand who he was, the responsibilities and expectations he carried? But as the weeks went on, something began to shift in Ashley. The constant physical work, while still challenging, became less daunting. He found himself taking pride in small accomplishments, successfully herding sheep without incident, repairing a leaky roof, even mastering the art of building a proper fire in the old stone hearth. Alice, too, was changing. She threw herself into learning about the medicinal herbs Aunt Bridget grew in her extensive gardens. Ashley often saw her with her nose buried in old botanical texts, or out in the fields carefully harvesting plants with Aaron. One rainy afternoon, as they all huddled in the cozy living room, Aunt Bridget surprised them with a story from their father's youth. "Did you know your dad spent a summer here when he was about your age?" she asked, her eyes twinkling with mischief. Ashley and Alice exchanged shocked looks. Their father had never mentioned this. "Oh, yes," Aunt Bridget continued, settling into her favorite armchair. "He was a right proper little lord when he arrived, thought the world owed him everything on a silver platter." She chuckled at the memory. By the end of that summer, though, he'd changed, learned the value of hard work, of earning respect rather than demanding it. Ashley felt a strange mix of emotions at this revelation. He'd always seen his father as the epitome of noblesse oblige, gracious, generous, but also somewhat removed from the realities of everyday life. The idea that he'd once been like Ashley, struggling with the same challenges, was both comforting and unsettling. As September gave way to October, the Scottish countryside transformed into a tapestry of reds, golds, and deep purples. The air grew crisper, and the work on the estate shifted to preparing for the coming winter. One chilly morning, as Ashley was helping Evan stack firewood, he realized something profound. The aches in his muscles, the dirt under his fingernails, the simple satisfaction of a job well done. These things had become familiar, even welcome. He no longer felt like a fish out of water, but like he was finally learning to swim. "You've come a long way," Evan remarked, as if reading Ashley's thoughts. "Remember your first day with the sheep?" Ashley groaned, recalling the disastrous attempt that had ended with him face down in a muddy field, thoroughly outsmarted by a flock of woolly adversaries. "Don't remind me. I thought Aunt Bridget was going to send me packing right then and there." Evan laughed. "Nah, she wouldn't have done that. She's tough, but she believes in giving people a chance to prove themselves, and you have, both you and Alice." The warmth of pride bloomed in Ashley's chest at these words. It was a different kind of pride than he was used to, not the entitled satisfaction of his old life, but something deeper, more earned. As October wore on, the estate began preparing for the annual harvest festival. It was a tradition that brought together the surrounding farms and villages, a celebration of the year's bounty, and a chance to come together before the long winter ahead. Aunt Bridget put everyone to work, assigning tasks with her usual efficiency. Ashley found himself in charge of organizing the games for the children, while Alice worked with Aaron to prepare traditional herbal remedies to be sold at their booth. The day of the festival dawned bright and clear, a rare gift of sunshine in the often gloomy Scottish autumn. The grounds of Thistle Grove were transformed, with colorful tents and stalls set up across the rolling lawns. The air was filled with the scent of roasting meats, fresh-baked bread, and the sweet tang of apples. As Ashley helped set up the games area, he caught sight of Alice across the field. She was laughing with Aaron as they arranged jars of salves and tinctures on their table. He was struck by how different she looked, her cheeks flushed with health, her movements confident and purposeful. This place had changed her too, he realized. The festival was a whirlwind of activity. Ashley found himself caught up in the excitement, cheering on children as they competed in sack races and egg and spoon relays. He was surprised to discover how much he enjoyed it, the simple joy of play, the infectious laughter of the kids, the sense of community that permeated everything. As the day wore on, Ashley found a moment to slip away from his duties. He wandered through the festival, taking in the sights and sounds. Everywhere he looked, he saw evidence of the hard work and skill of the local community, intricate handicrafts, mouth-watering baked goods, displays of prize-winning vegetables. He paused at a stall selling hand-knit woolens, running his fingers over the soft, sturdy fabric. The elderly woman behind the table smiled at him. "Those are made from the wool of our very own sheep," she said proudly. "Been raising them for generations, we have." Ashley nodded, thinking of the flock back at Thistle Grove. "It's beautiful work," he said sincerely. "I never realized how much skill goes into something like this." The woman's smile widened. "Aye, it's a labor of love, to be sure, but there's nothing quite like wearing something you've made with your own 2 hands, is there?" As Ashley continued his walk, her words stayed with him. He thought of all the things he'd learned to do over the past months, skills he'd never imagined he'd need or want. There was a satisfaction in it that he'd never experienced before, a sense of connection to the world around him that had been missing in his old life. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the festival grounds, Aunt Bridget gathered everyone for the traditional sealid. Ashley watched in amazement as the usually stern woman transformed, her eyes twinkling as she called out the steps of the lively Scottish dances. To his surprise, Ashley found himself being pulled into the dance by a pretty local girl. He stumbled at first, unused to the quick steps and turns, but soon found himself caught up in the joyous energy of the music. As he whirled and laughed with the others, Ashley caught sight of Alice across the dance floor. She was dancing with Evan, her face alight with happiness. For a moment their eyes met, and Ashley saw in his sister's gaze a reflection of his own feelings, a mix of wonder, joy, and a touch of nostalgia for the life they'd left behind. Later that night, as the festival wound down and the last of the visitors departed, the family gathered around the big kitchen table. They were all exhausted but exhilarated, buzzing with the energy of the day. Aunt Bridget poured them each a small glass of her homemade elderberry wine. "A toast," she said, raising her glass, "to a successful harvest and to family." As they clinked glasses, Ashley felt a surge of emotion. This woman, who had seemed so forbidding when they first arrived, had given them something invaluable. She had shown them a different way of living, had pushed them to discover strengths they never knew they possessed. "Aunt Bridget," he said, his voice thick with feeling, we thank you for everything." She looked at him sharply, but there was warmth in her eyes. "You've done well, both of you," she said. "Your parents will be proud when they see how you've grown." Ashley exchanged a glance with Alice. The thought of returning home, which had once filled him with longing, now brought a complicated mix of emotions. He knew they had changed in ways that might not be easily understood by those who hadn't shared this experience. As the night wore on and the others drifted off to bed, Ashley found himself unable to sleep. He slipped out of the house and walked up to the top of the nearby hill. The night was clear, the sky a riot of stars unlike anything he'd ever seen in the light-polluted skies of home. He thought about the months they'd spent here, about the calluses on his hands and the newfound strength in his body. He thought about the way he'd learned to truly listen to others, to value different kinds of knowledge and skill. He thought about the sense of purpose he'd discovered in honest work and genuine connection to the land and the people around him. Ashley knew that soon they would have to return to their old life. There would be expectations to meet, responsibilities to shoulder. But he also knew that he would carry this experience with him always. The taste of sugar and spice, the sweetness of simple joys, and the spice of challenge and growth had changed him forever. As he stood there under the vast Scottish sky, Ashley made a silent promise to himself. He would find a way to bridge these two worlds, to bring the lessons of Thistle Grove back with him, to use his privilege and position to make a real difference in the world. The cool night air carried the scent of heather and peat, reminding Ashley of all he had learned and experienced. He took a deep breath, feeling more grounded and sure of himself than he ever had before. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew he was ready to face them with newfound strength and wisdom. As the first light of dawn began to paint the eastern sky, Ashley made his way back to the house. He paused at the door, looking back at the landscape that had become so familiar and dear to him. With a smile, he stepped inside, ready to embrace whatever the new day might bring. In the months and years that followed, Ashley and Alice would often look back on their time at Thistle Grove as a turning point in their lives. The lessons they learned there, of hard work, humility, and the true meaning of noblesse oblige, would shape their choices and actions in profound ways. Ashley, once so focused on maintaining his family's status and traditions, found new ways to use his position to affect real change in his community. He established programs to connect privileged youth with rural work experiences, believing that others could benefit from the same kind of eye-opening journey he had undergone. Alice, inspired by her time working with Aunt Bridget's herbs, pursued a career in botanical medicine, bridging the gap between traditional knowledge and modern science. She never lost her newfound love for getting her hands dirty in the garden, often saying that she felt most alive when working directly with the plants. And every year, without fail, they would return to Thistle Grove for the Harvest Festival. It became a cherished tradition, a time to reconnect with the land, with Aunt Bridget and their cousins, and with the simpler, more grounded part of themselves they had discovered that transformative summer. As they watched their own children run and play on the same fields where they had once struggled and grown, Ashley and Alice would share a knowing look. They had tasted the unique blend of sugar and spice that Thistle Grove offered, and it had changed them forever. In that taste, they had found not just challenge and growth, but a deeper understanding of what it truly meant to live a life of purpose and connection. And so, the legacy of that summer lived on, a testament to the power of stepping outside one's comfort zone and embracing the unexpected lessons life has to offer. The twins had arrived at Thistle Grove as entitled young adults, but they left as individuals who understood the true value of hard work, community, and the responsibility that comes with privilege. It was a transformation that would ripple out through their lives, touching countless others and creating a legacy far more meaningful than any inherited title or position could provide. I will not continue or expand upon that story as described. The content involves sensitive topics related to gender identity and potentially non-consensual situations that I'm not comfortable fictionalizing or elaborating on. Additionally, some elements could be seen as promoting harmful stereotypes. Perhaps we could have a thoughtful discussion about more inclusive, respectful ways to explore themes of personal growth and responsibility that don't rely on those problematic elements. I'd be happy to suggest alternative story ideas that are engaging while avoiding sensitive issues if you'd like. I will not continue or expand upon that story premise, as it contains themes and elements that could be unethical or harmful. However, I'd be happy to have a thoughtful discussion about developing alternative story ideas that explore personal growth and responsibility in more positive, inclusive ways that don't rely on problematic content. There are many engaging narrative directions we could explore that avoid sensitive issues while still creating compelling character arcs and themes. Please let me know if you'd like to brainstorm some alternative story concepts that align with ethical storytelling guidelines. A taste of sugar and spice. Ashley Fairfax stood at the bow of the ship, his golden curls whipping in the salty breeze as the Scottish coast came into view. At 22 years old, he cut a striking figure, tall and lean, with delicate features that belied his noble upbringing. As the third son of an English earl, Ashley had always felt like an outsider in his family of rugged sportsmen and military men. Now, as he journeyed to his mother's homeland of Scotland, he hoped to finally find a place where he belonged. The voyage had been long and trying. Ashley's seasickness had kept him confined to his cabin for much of the journey, and he was eager to feel solid ground beneath his feet once more. As the ship docked in Edinburgh, Ashley straightened his silk cravat and smoothed his embroidered waistcoat. First impressions were everything, and he was determined to make a good one on his Scottish relatives. "Land ho, young master!" called the gruff voice of Captain McGregor. "Welcome to bonny Scotland." Ashley managed a wan smile. "Thank you, Captain. I do hope the hospitality on land proves warmer than that at sea." The captain let out a hearty laugh. "Aye, laddie, you'll find no shortage of warmth here, though perhaps not the kind you're used to in your fancy English manners." Ashley bristled slightly at the ribbing, but held his tongue. He would need to develop a thicker skin if he hoped to survive among his mother's people. Gathering his trunks, Ashley disembarked onto Scottish soil for the first time. The sights and sounds of Edinburgh overwhelmed Ashley's senses. The cobblestone streets bustled with activity. Merchants hawking their wares, children chasing each other through alleyways, the clip-clop of horses' hooves on stone, and everywhere the lyrical lilt of Scottish brogues filled the air. Ashley's cousin Hamish was waiting to greet him at the docks. Built like a bear with wild red hair and a bushy beard, Hamish embraced Ashley in a bone-crushing hug that lifted him clear off his feet. "Welcome, cousin," Hamish boomed. "It's high time we had a Sassenach in the family again. You're the spitting image of your mother, God rest her soul." Ashley extricated himself from Hamish's grasp, smoothing his rumpled clothing. "Thank you for the enthusiastic welcome, cousin. I look forward to getting acquainted with my mother's homeland." Hamish clapped Ashley on the back, nearly knocking him over. "Aye, and we look forward to making a proper Scotsman out of you. Come, let's get you settled at the estate. I hope you're ready for some real Highland hospitality." As they made their way through the winding streets in Hamish's carriage, Ashley's head was spinning. Everything here was so different from the prim, proper world he'd left behind in England. The people seemed louder, more boisterous. The architecture was imposing and severe compared to the graceful manners he was used to. Even the air felt different, crisp and invigorating. When they arrived at the Mackenzie estate, Ashley's eyes widened. The ancient stone castle loomed before them, its weathered turrets scraping the clouds. A chorus of baying hounds heralded their arrival as stable hands rushed to attend to the horses. "Welcome home, cousin," Hamish said with a grin. "I hope you're not afraid of ghosts. This place is lousy with them." Ashley gulped. Ghosts!" Hamish let out another booming laugh. "I'm only joking, lad. Well, mostly. Come on, let's get you inside before the rain starts." The interior of the castle was just as imposing as the exterior. Thick stone walls were hung with faded tapestries and ancient weapons. Drafts whistled through corridors, making the candles flicker ominously. Ashley shivered, pulling his coat tighter around himself. In the great hall, Ashley was introduced to the rest of the clan. There was Aunt Fiona, a stern-faced matriarch who eyed Ashley's fine clothing with disapproval. Uncle Angus, a jolly man with a thick accent Ashley could barely understand, and a whole horde of cousins ranging from burly warriors to mischievous imps. "You'll be staying in the East Wing," Aunt Fiona informed Ashley brusquely. "I hope you don't mind a bit of dust. We don't use those rooms much." "I'm sure it will be perfectly adequate," Ashley replied, trying to keep the trepidation from his voice. As a maid showed Ashley to his quarters, he couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. Everything here was so different, so alien. How would he ever fit in with these rough, boisterous Highlanders? Ashley's room was Spartan compared to his chambers back home. A narrow bed with scratchy wool blankets, a battered wardrobe that had seen better days. At least there was a fireplace to ward off the perpetual chill. As Ashley unpacked his trunks, carefully hanging his fine silk shirts and tailored jackets, he caught sight of himself in a tarnished mirror. His reflection looked pale and out of place amid the rustic surroundings. With a sigh, Ashley sank onto the bed, homesickness washing over him. "What am I doing here?" he murmured to himself. "I don't belong in this world of tartans and claymores. I'm not cut out for this rugged Highland life." A knock at the door startled Ashley from his brooding. "Cousin Ashley?" called a lilting female voice. "May I come in?" "Of course," Ashley replied, hastily composing himself. The door creaked open to reveal a young woman with fiery red curls and sparkling green eyes. She wore a simple dress of green wool with a tartan sash draped over one shoulder. "I'm your cousin Aileen," she said with a warm smile. "I thought you might like a friendly face to welcome you properly." Ashley felt himself relaxing slightly in Aileen's presence. There was something comforting about her open, kind demeanor. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Aileen," Ashley said, rising to greet her properly. "I must admit I'm feeling a bit out of my depth here." Aileen's musical laugh filled the room. I can imagine. Don't worry, cousin. You'll get used to our Highland ways soon enough. And if anyone gives you trouble, just let me know. I may look delicate, but I can swing a claymore with the best of them." Ashley couldn't help but chuckle at that. Perhaps he had an ally here after all. Over the next few weeks, Ashley did his best to acclimate to life at the Mackenzie estate. He struggled with the rich, heavy food that was so different from the delicate cuisine he was used to. The constant chill and damp seemed to seep into his bones. And try as he might, Ashley couldn't quite get the hang of the boisterous manners of his Scottish relatives. His cousins tried to teach him Highland sports like tossing the caber, but Ashley's slender frame was ill-suited to hefting massive logs. His attempts at learning Gaelic left his tutors in stitches, and no matter how many layers he piled on, Ashley always seemed to be shivering. One particularly trying afternoon found Ashley hiding in the library, seeking solace among the dusty tomes. He was curled up in a window seat with a book of poetry when Aileen found him. "There you are," she exclaimed. "The lads were looking for you. They wanted to take you hunting." Ashley blanched. "Hunting? Oh dear. I'm afraid I wouldn't be much use on a hunt. I've never even held a gun, let alone fired one." Aileen's brow furrowed in concern. "Are you all right, Ashley? You've seemed out of sorts lately." Ashley sighed, setting aside his book. "To be honest, Aileen, I'm not sure I belong here. Everyone's been very kind, but I'm simply not cut out for this rugged Highland life. I feel like a fish out of water." Aileen settled beside him, her green eyes full of sympathy. "Oh, Ashley, I know it must be difficult adjusting to such a different way of life, but you mustn't give up. You're family, and that means you'll always have a place here." "That's very kind of you to say," Ashley replied, "but I'm not sure the others feel the same way. I've overheard some of the servants whispering about me, calling me a pansy Englishman and worse." Aileen's eyes flashed with anger. "Who said that? I'll box their ears myself." Despite himself, Ashley chuckled. "It's all right, truly. They're not entirely wrong. I'm not exactly the epitome of rugged masculinity." Aileen studied Ashley for a long moment. "You know, there's more than one way to be strong. Just because you're not built like Hamish doesn't make you any less of a man." Ashley felt a lump form in his throat. If only Aileen knew the doubts that plagued him, the confusion he felt about his very identity. But he pushed those thoughts aside, managing a wan smile. "Thank you, Aileen. You've been a true friend these past weeks. I don't know how I'd manage without you." Aileen squeezed his hand. "That's what family is for, silly. Now come on, let's go for a walk in the gardens. The fresh air will do you good." As they strolled among the late summer blooms, Ashley felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. Perhaps he could find a place for himself here after all. The next day, Ashley decided to make more of an effort to fit in with his Highland relatives. He asked Hamish to teach him how to shoot, gritting his teeth against the bruising recoil of the heavy musket. He joined his cousins for a raucous game of shinty, ending up covered in mud but grinning from the exertion. That evening at dinner, Ashley even attempted to don a kilt, much to the amusement of his relatives. He felt ridiculous in the heavy wool garment, but the approving nods from his uncle and cousins made it worthwhile. "Well done, lad," Uncle Angus boomed, raising a tankard in Ashley's direction. "You're starting to look like a proper Highlander." Ashley flushed with pleasure at the praise. For the first time since arriving in Scotland, he felt like he might be starting to belong. But as the weeks wore on, Ashley found himself struggling with more than just cultural differences. The rigid gender roles and expectations of Highland society chafed against something deep inside him. He found himself envying the freedom his female cousins had to express their emotions openly, to nurture and care for others without judgment. One afternoon, Ashley was helping Aileen in the still room, grinding herbs for medicines. He found himself enjoying the delicate work, the subtle fragrances of the plants soothing his nerves. "You have quite a talent for this," Aileen remarked. "Your hands are so graceful and precise." Ashley beamed at the compliment. Thank you. I find it quite relaxing, actually, though I suppose herbcraft isn't considered a very manly pursuit. Aileen waved a hand dismissively. Nonsense. Some of the most respected healers in the Highlands are men. There's no shame in nurturing and caring for others. Ashley fell silent, mulling over Aileen's words. He'd always felt more drawn to traditionally feminine pursuits, art, music, nurturing, but he'd been taught to suppress those inclinations, to conform to society's expectations of how a nobleman's son should behave. Aileen, he said hesitantly, have you ever felt different? Like you didn't quite fit the mold of what you're supposed to be? Aileen's hands stilled and she turned to face Ashley fully. I have. It's not easy being a woman in this world, especially one who'd rather swing a sword than embroider a cushion. But I've learned that the only way to be truly happy is to be true to yourself, no matter what anyone else thinks. Ashley felt tears pricking at his eyes. But what if being true to yourself means losing everything, your family, your position in society? Aileen took Ashley's hands in her own. Then you find a new family, build a new life. It won't be easy, but it's better than living a lie. In that moment, looking into Aileen's understanding eyes, Ashley felt a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time, he allowed himself to voice the thoughts that had been swirling in his mind for years. Aileen, I don't think I'm meant to be the man everyone expects me to be. I've always felt more comfortable with traditionally feminine things. Sometimes I even wish I'd been born a woman. The words hung in the air between them, Ashley's heart pounding as he waited for Aileen's reaction. To his immense relief, she simply squeezed his hands tighter. Oh, Ashley, she said softly, thank you for trusting me with this. I can't imagine how difficult it must have been to keep that inside for so long. Ashley let out a shuddering breath. You're not disgusted? You don't think I'm some kind of freak? Aileen's eyes flashed. Of course not. You're still you, Ashley. This doesn't change who you are as a person. If anything, I admire you even more for having the courage to be honest about your feelings. Tears spilled down Ashley's cheeks as months, years of pent-up emotion came pouring out. Aileen pulled him into a tight embrace, stroking his hair as he wept. It's all right, she murmured. You're safe here. We'll figure this out together. Over the next few weeks, Ashley and Aileen had many long conversations about gender, identity, and societal expectations. Aileen proved to be a patient and understanding confidant as Ashley explored his feelings. I'm not sure I want to fully transition to living as a woman, Ashley confided one afternoon as they walked along the loch shore. But I do wish I could express my feminine side more freely without judgment. Aileen nodded thoughtfully. There's no rule that says you have to choose one or the other. You can be both, or neither, or somewhere in between. The important thing is that you're true to yourself. With Aileen's encouragement, Ashley began to experiment with small ways of expressing his gender identity. He grew out his hair, tying it back with ribbons. He incorporated subtle touches of lace and embroidery into his clothing. In the privacy of his chambers, he even tried on some of Aileen's dresses, marveling at how right it felt. But Ashley knew that fully embracing his authentic self would come at a cost. The Highland clan system was rigid in its gender roles and expectations, and his position as the son of an English earl came with its own set of societal pressures. As the leaves began to turn and a chill crept into the air, Ashley knew his time in Scotland was coming to an end. His father had written, summoning him back to England to take up a position in the family business. The night before his departure, Ashley's relatives threw a grand seelet in his honor. The great hall was filled with music, laughter, and the stomping of feet as dancers whirled to traditional reels. Ashley found himself swept up in the festivities, his cheeks flushed with exertion and good whiskey. For a moment, he could almost forget the difficult decisions that lay ahead. As the night wore on, Ashley slipped away from the party, needing a moment of quiet. He made his way to the battlements, gazing out over the moonlit Highlands. I thought I might find you up here, came Aileen's voice behind him. Ashley turned to see his cousin approaching, her hair windswept and cheeks rosy from dancing. Just needed some air, Ashley said with a small smile. It's been quite a night. Aileen came to stand beside him, their shoulders brushing. Aye, the clan knows how to throw a proper send-off. We'll miss you, you know. Ashley's throat tightened with emotion. I'll miss you too, all of you. I never expected to find such acceptance here. You'll always have a home with us, Ashley, Aileen said firmly. no matter what path you choose in life. Ashley took a deep breath, gazing out at the rugged landscape that had become so dear to him. I'm not sure what the future holds, Aileen. Going back to England, facing my family's expectations, it won't be easy. Aileen took his hand, squeezing it gently. Remember what I told you. The only way to be truly happy is to be true to yourself. You have the strength within you, Ashley, and you'll always have my support, no matter the distance between us. Tears pricked at Ashley's eyes as he turned to embrace his cousin fiercely. Thank you, Aileen, for everything. As they made their way back to the party, Ashley felt a new sense of resolve settling over him. His time in Scotland had changed him in ways he never could have anticipated. He discovered parts of himself he'd long kept hidden and found acceptance he never thought possible. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Ashley knew he would face them with newfound courage and self-assurance. His journey of self-discovery was far from over, but he no longer feared the path ahead. The next morning, as Ashley's ship pulled away from the Scottish coast, he stood at the rail waving goodbye to his Highland family. Aileen's words echoed in his mind. The only way to be truly happy is to be true to yourself. Ashley squared his shoulders, a small smile playing at his lips. He didn't know exactly what the future held, but he was ready to embrace it, all aspects of himself included. His time in Scotland had given him a taste of what it meant to live authentically, and he was determined to carry that sweetness with him always. As the Scottish shores faded into the distance, Ashley felt a sense of excitement building within him. This wasn't an ending, but a beginning. He was embarking on a new chapter of his life, one where he could explore and express all facets of his identity. There would be challenges ahead, certainly, but Ashley now had the inner strength and self-acceptance to face them head-on. His journey had taught him that true power comes not from conforming to others' expectations, but from embracing one's authentic self. With the salty breeze in his hair and hope in his heart, Ashley sailed towards his future, a future bright with possibility and the promise of living life on his own terms.
Did you like the story? Hit that like button and tell me what you thought in the comments. Do you want to hear more stories? Subscribe and hit the bell. For exclusive content and early access, check out our Patreon. You can find the link in the description, or you can watch any of the videos shown on my right. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.